So, New Mutants was the finale of the 20-plus-year run of the X-Men franchise under Fox. Unsurprisingly, it was terrible. But even before it came on screen, it was the subject of multiple discussions concerning the casting of Sunspot and, to a lesser degree, Dr. Cecilia Reyes. In the comics, Sunspot, aka Roberto, he was drawn with dark skin, curly hair, and clearly mixed race leaning to black features. In the film, he was played by a white Brazilian actor, and when asked why this happened in an interview with IO9, director Josh Boone said, "It's like maybe if Henry didn't exist, I would have found somebody who was darker skinned who exemplified what I needed, but it was never about the color of their skin for me. I didn't care so much about the racism I've heard about in Brazil, about light skinned versus dark skinned. To me it was I wanted to represent Brazil in a positive way, and I wanted to find somebody who seemed like he could look like a guy who's had the silver spoon in his mouth, who has like a really rich dad, and Henry just exemplified all these things. He's a beyond reproach human being, and I sort of defy anybody who wants to say that Henry's not a good Roberto simply because he's lighter skinned. He's not a good Roberto because he's lighter skinned." So basically, he wanted a rich white boy, so he got a rich white boy. The cast for Cecilia didn't get nearly as much attention, but the optics are the same. A darker skinned Afro-Latinx woman became a lighter-skinned Latinx woman. In the case of Sunspot, this is not just something unique to this film. Marvel Comics has been making the character progressively lighter and more European in phenotype despite his initial appearance. Sunspot is not a standout when it comes to the issue of comic book characters of color having an ever-changing phenotype and color. Today, we're going to look at some notable examples of this issue in comics, why it matters, and the repercussions it has in building a stronger, better comic book community. Color Complex by Kathy Russell Cole, Midge Wilson, and Ronald E. Hall, they explain that the state of colorism in the Americas came as a result of the lighter-skinned and mixed-race black people getting certain privileges over their darker-skinned counterparts. They explain that since the 1920s, anthropologist Melville Herkenstoffs studied Harlem couples and found that more than half of wives were lighter than their spouses. This is still seen to be reflected in the dating choices of elite black men. For me, discussing colorism and texturism isn't about critiquing an individual person's relationship to their blackness or their blackness itself. It's about looking at how white society has allowed certain people to be the images of blackness. Whose blackness is elevated? What features are allowed to remain and which are airbrushed out? Now, I wrote this before the whole Dolezal Part 2 thing happened. However, I think that that incident is very indicative of what darker-skinned women say. This white woman from Kansas was allowed to cosplay as a black woman from many different kinds of the diaspora simply because with her lighter skin, she took the place that is usually kept for lighter skinned black women. And this speaks to how we as a society continue to elevate lighter skinned people. And it starts creating all these weird confusions when you have white people who are trying to cosplay as us and using the racist white supremacist power structures and colorism that they helped invent. The reality is that we are still paying for the consequences of their fuckery. So that's great. And it doesn't help that we have so many different studies that tell us that darker skinned black women and darker skinned women of color in general are seen as more masculine, less attractive, and that bleaching in Asian societies is a popular trend. Even when there are certain darker skin or tanning popularities going on in different cultures, it is still coming with a stigma of hypersexuality. Colorism is a real thing for all of us, because it doesn't help that when we look at the celebrities that are meant to reflect us, whether they be Asian, they be black, they be indigenous, they more likely than not are going to be lighter skinned, white phenotype, and that's frustrating as all fuck. And comics are just another part of all of that. We could not possibly have a conversation about colorism and comics without talking about Storm. Created by writer Len Wein and artist David Cockrum in 1975, Storm is one of the most important, recognizable, and popular black characters in comics, period. She has a Kenyan mother and a black American born father, and she herself was born in New York. The mutant has omega level abilities to manipulate the weather, atmospheric pressure, and almost all ecology. Although you probably wouldn't be able to tell that from the movies that only make her do 2 wind moves and 1 lightning attack. For a long time, her, Misty Knight, and Bumblebee were the 3 well-known comic book characters in both of the big houses, DC and Marvel. You could also throw in Vixen as well, as she has slowly gained in popularity since her debut. Storm's complexion is deep brown, and if we look at early images of her from Cockrum, she is distinctly drawn as a brown-skinned woman. However, she is still lacking what we would consider definitive black phenotypes. Now, phenotype isn't everything. Genetics are a mixed bag, and you never know what you're gonna get. Alexander Dumas was like 1/4 black and had 4C. Meanwhile, I have 2 fully black parents and I'm 3C4A. So ancestors be playing games with who gets what qualities. So I'm not saying that phenotype is the end all be all in defining how you are in terms of blackness. However, in comics, everything is based on choices. These are not real people. These are characters that have been designed, and often designed by white people. Seeing as how Storm has 2 fully black parents and her phenotypes are what they are, the choices, when we think about it in the larger scheme of things, are somewhat suspect. White hair is cool, but she also has blue eyes. Why blue? Why not gray? Or why not always have them be white to match her hair? Why does her hair look like it couldn't even hold a Bantu knot? Make it make sense. She can have white hair. Why does it have to be straight? Storm's blackness being a part of her features is something that comic book artists have been trying to correct over time. Sometimes. This is why the casting for Storm has always been such an issue. By casting mixed race black actresses, all of them having lighter skin and less Afrocentric features, once again we are seeing Storm through a lens of acceptable Hollywood blackness, which is the opposite direction we want to go into. Storm, in addition to being a powerful mutant, is beautiful. Everyone wants to date her. Everybody wants to date Storm, okay? Wolverine, Magneto, Loki, she is a 5-star chick. And she carries herself with a sensual dignity that is 100% her own. This is very important for darker skinned black women to see, especially since we only get like 1 dark-skinned woman per film unless it's Black Panther. Storm's pigment is important. Her phenotype is important. And if we have to have her being, 1A on the hair texture scale, then you know what? I like my Storm with Jackson 5 nostrils. DC be on this bullshit too, and in no place is this more clear than with Connor Hawke. Connor Hawke is the son of Oliver Queen, the original Green Arrow, and his former girlfriend, Sandra Moonday Hawke. Sandra is half black and half Korean. Oliver is white, and yet Connor is drawn to look like this. He originally was depicted with Asian features, dark skin, and blonde hair and eyes. choices. Yet he is consistently being whitewashed, light-skinned, with his ethnic features being reduced until he basically just looks like Roy Harper more and more each day. I have a copy of Green Arrow, Black Canary, The Wedding album, and his features changed so much from issue to issue, I thought he was two different people. Another character that falls into this "my dad's so white, so fuck my mother's ethnic background" stuff is Damian Wayne. Damian Wayne is the son of the Batman Bruce Wayne and longtime on and off love interest Talia al Ghul. Talia al Ghul's ethnicity is also on the forever changing roster. We know from the comics that through her father, Ra's al Ghul, that she is some blend of Eurasian. Chinese is kind of what has been given in some places from an area in North Africa, and her mother is sort of undefined ethnicity-wise, so that's helpful. Regardless, these characters are not white, but the writers tend to have this sort of hodgepodge way of discussing them when it comes to actually defining what their ethnicity is. We created an equal to Batman, and that's what Ra's al Ghul is all about. He's not necessarily Arabic, he's not necessarily Eastern, he's not necessarily Western, he's not necessarily anything. He's just a villain and he's equal to Batman. I guess maybe I'm old-fashioned, but if you're gonna name a villain Ra's al Ghul, make him a mysterious Arab in design. Just let him be Arabic? This is how you end up with Liam Neeson and Marion Cotillard as these characters. Which again, mess. Anyway, that trickles down to a character like Damian, who is Arabic, Asian, and white. And yet more often than not is made to look like a little white kid. That erases an entire part of his identity. And again, it takes one of the few Arabic heroes we have and erases their ethnicity from the page. All because there is no consensus of what the character's ethnicity is, what their phenotype and their skin color should be. You don't get an ability for the audience to know who these characters are, and the people who are casting these characters can pull from any one illustration and say, see, they're light-skinned here, that makes it fine. Interview, it is referenced that Sunspot's backstory is rooted in race issues within Brazil. So let's just take a small moment to clarify what exactly that means. Roberto's father in the comics is Afro-Brazilian and a businessman from a poor background who became a millionaire through hard work, and his mother is a white woman. Roberto in the comics becomes a soccer star and is considered by the Olympics, so bit player. During a game, racist members of the opposing team assault him and they get into a fight and Roberto's powers activate and he becomes a, filled with this solid black solar energy. None of these choices are by accident. Race in Brazil is very complicated. Brazil has the second largest black population in the world, with more than 75 million people of African descent. Brazil was also the last country in this part of the world to end chattel slavery as we know it in the Americas. Now, there was no sense of reparations or anything in Brazil, and newly freed black Brazilians were sort of just left to create their own lives for themselves out of nothing. They got no land, no money, no guarantee of education, and it left them even more disenfranchised. And because they got no sort of help, it left them in a country with massive inequality between whites and non-whites. Because of this, the conversation about race in Brazil became closely intertwined with conversations about poverty and class. Though there were no laws that directly targeted those of African descent, sort of like our Jim Crows in the United States on the basis of race, there were laws that were put in place that created inequality due to education. For example, when Brazil first became a republic in 1889, voting was restricted to only literate men, which barred the majority of the black population from being able to vote. In addition to this, there was also a redefining of crime that criminalized many aspects of African culture. According to Ivanar dos Santos, there is a hierarchy of skin color where blacks, mixed race, and dark-skinned people are expected to know their place in society. Although 54% of the population is black or has black ancestry, they are represented by only 24% of the 513 chosen representatives in the legislature as of 2018. The salaries of white people in Brazil are on average 43% higher than the salaries of black people. Race is a big part of what exists in Brazil. So if you're going to take a character who is Afro-Brazilian, who literally deals with racism for the first time he appears, and whitewash him in both the comics and the movies, that is a choice that shows that you are using the character for flavor points, but have no understanding of what that character stands for. It is absurd, especially in a series like X-Men, which is a metaphor for racism in the first damn place. Afro-Latinx characters are constantly being erased and whitewashed, with very often the Latinx part of their identity being underwritten and underdeveloped, with their blackness being stripped away. Dr. Cecilia Reyes is a black Puerto Rican woman who looks like this. Why was Alice Baraga even on the casting docket? Just to pivot beyond Afro-Latinx, look at Bane. He is a character in comics and mostly in animation drawn to be brown, but in live action casting has always been played by a white dude. They have no problem darkening up for flavor, but when it comes to actually allowing one of the best Batman villains to actually get to be Latino, they can't make it happen. And it doesn't help that when they do create characters like Miles Morales, they don't actually use any Latinx inspiration for that character. To the point where when I asked a few friends of mine who know comics what was Miles' mother's ethnicity, they said Dominican or did not know. The actor who depicted Miles in Into the Spider-Verse thought Miles was Mexican. For a long time when they made America Chavez, they didn't actually clarify where her people were from. This matters. You can't just put Latinx on something and not define it. What island you're from, where country you're from, all of that defines how your Latinx is. Like, it's not a monolith. The kind of Afro-Latinx you are is not monolithic. Frustration. Colorism is a global issue that impacts people of color around the world. The reason why I'm always so loud about this issue is because A, it should be concerning and I should be loud about it, but B, I have been colorist. I remember as a kid hearing people make colorist jokes and not responding to it, not arguing, not pushing back because it was so normalized in my majority black school. And that's a problem. We could not allow the fact that we are better now to erase the fact that there have been times where we collectively have shat on darker skinned people and allowed their pain to be nourishment for our progress. The fact of the matter is that we should be loud about injustice, and colorism helps breed injustice. With a comic book industry that loves to create diverse characters and throw them into the wind so that we, the people of color who read comics, have to deal with the fandom aggressions of that, they should at least get certain things right. When a character is drawn with dark skin and kinky hair, that should be consistent. When a character is drawn with Asian features, that should be consistent. We should not have to keep going back and forth about what Storm's complexion is. That's ridiculous. In 2020, we should have Negro nose Storm consistency. She should never look like Felicia Hardy cosplaying as Storm. It's ridiculous. It doesn't help anyone and it's just annoying. And this happens in animation and everything else. There needs to be an established consistency for how characters of color are depicted, their phenotype and their skin color. Because at the end of the day, you know what? We know when a character is white. We know what a white character looks like. It's consistent. Our characters of color should be drawn consistently too. And colorism will continue to be an issue with casting as we continue to make movies, with Static, with, you know, the next Black Panther movie, with Blade. It's important that we see darker skinned people in every single layer of comic book adaptations being treated with dignity and compassion, but also Latinx characters. We need more Latinx characters that look like the lead from Roma, more indigenous women of color. We need to see dark skin, these features. It matters, especially for women. Stop lighting us. Stop pretending that this issue doesn't exist. And comic books need to play their part. Stop lightening these characters. It's gross, it's rude, and when you do it, it shows us how little you actually care and are invested in us succeeding. So anyway, I felt very strongly about this topic. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And again, thank you to my lovely Patreons for your endless support. I am trying to make these shorter but engaging videos with the script, a little bit of embellishment in the effects, because I think that it gives you guys quality that you enjoy. I'm able to still rant a little bit, and I'm glad to be able to do this. Thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe. I wanted to do this part at the end because I didn't want to make this the focus of the video. That felt very gross to me personally. But I just want to say rest in power to Chadwick, because that loss is something that will reverberate in the Black nerd community forever. Black Panther was an experience. I saw it in the theater 3 to 4 times. I loved it. It was something that my parents went to go see, and when they came back, they were so excited, and they don't see comic book movies like that anymore. So it was an event. It was a movement. It was so many things. To see so many dark-skinned people in comics, you know, to see so many dark-skinned people in a comic book movie thriving, being beautiful, being strong, being kind. He knew the importance of what he was doing. He knew the importance of having that character, and he fought through so many things which no one should have to do. No one should have to fight through all of that. And it is just so sad and tragic that he is gone. And I'm so pleased that I got to meet him. He was so unbelievably kind, so unbelievably sweet in just the moments I met him. I cannot even begin to express the loss that I can't even begin to explain. And even though I've written about it in the past, I don't even think words are enough. It is so unbelievably sad. And it is a reminder of the importance of seeing people that look like you on screen and giving them opportunities and celebrating them when they are succeeding. And I'm so glad that we were able to celebrate him, that we went out for Black Panther the way that we did, and that he knew for every moment that when we did this, when we said Wakanda forever, we meant that shit. And I hope that we keep that in our hearts, we keep that in our spirits. You know, y'all know I'm a pagan, so I definitely believe in ancestors, and it's tragic that he's an ancestor already. But he was our king, and he would want us to be strong for him, like he was strong for us. And we can do that by supporting the Black actors in our community, the Black women in our community, the Black trans people in our community, and fighting for what the essence of the Black Panther is, which is the dignity of Black people, wherever they may be, to respect us all, that you don't take your opportunities wherever you are in the diaspora and use it to shit on anyone else in the diaspora, to be better than how our colonizers want us to be to each other. That is the best thing that we can do to honor him, what he was fighting for, and what Black Panther is supposed to mean to all of us today. So on that note, rest in power, Chadwick. I hope that you are in peace. I hope you and Naya are like, you know, shitting the breeze and talking about how you helped change Black kids for the better, because y'all did that shit. Y'all did that.